Amazing. It is exactly 6:05 p.m. EST here in
Oh,
Toronto. So just mic check. Everyone and anyone can hear me?
yes.
Perfect, perfect. Amazing, amazing. Thank you, folks, for joining today's session. Welcome to Warvio's Community Financial Education Series as part of November Financial Literacy Month. I'm going to start off by pushing back against the word literacy itself and kind of convert it into financial education month, just so we're being in a bit more of an empowered state, right? So my name is Justina Kanza. I'm the program and community manager here at Warvio. I've been with the company for about 9 months now, and I'm gonna go through in a bit what we do at Warvio, why we're doing this community financial education series, and also talk a little bit more about the different community partners that we're partnering with, and then pass it over to our speaker for the month. As we chat, please feel free to add anything to the chat, any questions that come up. I know Adiba, our speaker today, will have a designated Q&A section, but feel free to jot the questions and thoughts in the chat as she speaks, and I'll be moderating the chat today. So today's session is really focused on navigating the financial landscape in Canada for newcomers. This is part one of four-part series that will happen throughout the month of November. So today we'll chat with Adiba, who's a financial expert around, as I mentioned, navigating the financial landscape in Canada for newcomers. What are some do's and don'ts, right? What are some things to keep in mind? How do you understand and navigate things like TFSAs, RRSPs, and things of that sort. And then this will be followed by another session next week and the week after, so November 13th and 20th, by Jean Paul Nyareka, who will then walk us through understanding credit scores and debt management. And then we'll close it off with a session from Jeremike, who will then talk to us about, building healthy savings habits and for different financial goals on November 26th. So I wanted to start first by laying the foundation around why we do what we do at Warvio. What do the numbers and what does the reality look like for immigrants in Canada when it comes to navigating the financial landscape, when it comes to the financial barriers that they face? So part of the challenge that from research has been that part of sorry, I think there's someone in the chat. Yeah, part of the challenge we found has been that 75% of immigrants struggle to find a $10,000 loan, and a lot of us do hold high interest debt. And for those of us that end up being entrepreneurs, there's a 71% chance that we have to bootstrap our own businesses, which is very challenging because we already know there's a wage gap there, right? There's some economic disparities when it comes to income, and the only resort, because we can't find financial loans from traditional banks, is we end up using payday lenders, and they're quite predatory in their interest rates, as you will come to understand through some of the sessions that we'll have, and this results in a high default rate. And so, again, in addition to these numbers, we found limited access to credit amongst immigrants. And I am saying these things. I'm an immigrant myself. I moved to Canada about 7 years ago now. So I have lived this. And as much as I would throw as many numbers at you, I know a lot of you have lived this reality more so than these numbers can ever capture. And so part of the challenges, as we know, is limited access to credit, which we face due to challenges in accessing affordable credit due to factors such as limited credit history. I mentioned income disparities and systemic barriers within the system, and this impacts our ability to start, to grow, and invest in businesses, to access capital for down payments in our homes, and so much more. And part of the solution that we're providing here at Warvio is an alternative credit building tool, because we believe if you have credit in the way that the Canadian financial landscape understands credit, if you have that credit history, then maybe we unlock more opportunities for you to access credit. And in completely, if we also have another way for you to access credit that's not, predatory lenders, then you don't have to spend so much of your income that's already, we talked of the income disparity, that's already a little bit behind compared to other non-immigrants and non-racialized folks. You don't have to spend that on interest rates. And then the other piece was also low financial, I said I'll do away with the word literacy, so I'll say low financial education, right? So there's lack of financial education within our communities, within immigrant communities, leading to difficulty in understanding financial products and managing finances effectively, and also making informed financial decisions. And I am a great example of the impact of low financial education, because when I first moved to Canada 7 years ago, the first thing I obviously had to do was open a bank account. So I remember I went to a specific bank at the time to open a bank account. I was so young. I was an international student. It was my first time being away, from my family in that way, and having to make these decisions by myself. I walked into a bank. I almost mentioned the bank, but I walked into the bank, and I was just looking to open a bank account. And the first thing they said was like, "Oh, you can get a credit card as well." And they didn't do a good job of explaining what a credit card is to me. I also had never heard about a credit card ever. So what I understood was I'm being given $1,000 extra by the bank per month to use however I wish, right? And so that $1,000 credit limit that I had, every month I would just go and like tap it. The first month I went and tapped H&M. I sent money back home. I thought I was rich without understanding the impact that had on my credit score. I wasn't paying it back. My interest rate was increasing. And I've said, like, I spent the first 4 or 5 years like building my credit score back up to what it should have been, because no one told me these things, right? And so this is such a huge reality for immigrants in our community. The unfamiliarity with unconventional financial products can lead to so much confusion and distrust of financial institutions, rightfully so, and missed opportunities for wealth building. So imagine if, from day one, I knew what a credit score was. I knew how important it was to have a good credit score, and I had all the resources and information to build one, so much so that now if I'm looking to buy a home, I don't have to have all of that, poor credit on my report. I don't need to have those missed payments on my report. So it's such a huge missed opportunity for wealth building in our community. And this is why it's especially important for us, beyond building, alternative credit tools and others fancy and technology, resources and solutions. Beyond that, it's important that first and foremost, we educate our community with the knowledge that can bridge the gap between traditional newcomer practices and the Canadian financial system. Because the financial practices back in our home countries are completely different from the ones that we see here. And so that's why we have now this four-part education series. We hope to continue this beyond just November, the Financial Literacy Month. And for many immigrants, we are intersectionalized, if you will, into different races and genders, and all of these intersectional identities comes with discrimination practices in financial services. There is bias within the financial industry that can lead into unequal treatment and missed opportunities for immigrants to further again build wealth and further exacerbating our financial barriers and disparities. So we've heard so many stories, for example, on the entrepreneur side, about how women entrepreneurs and Black entrepreneurs are underfunded, right? We don't access as much capital from the banks. We're under huge scrutiny when we go to deposit huge sums of money, because then they have to investigate, where did this money come from? So all of these discriminatory practices within the financial industry, they limit our access to financial services, perpetuating these wealth disparities, widening the gap, and hindering overall economic development and prosperity. So the solution, and you hear a little bit more about the programs that Wovio is launching and working on, but the solution on our end is, again, community economic development to foster support, community where we support each other, where as a community we come together, we pool funds, and we ensure that all members of the community can tap into those funds and resources to kind of take matters into our own hands. The fight to break down the systemic barriers is still there, but we know that it's a long-term fight. But in the meantime, our communities need food, our communities need access to funding, our community needs capital for businesses and whatever else. So these are the ways that in the meantime we can work on that. As I continue, I'm just going to wrap up in a couple of minutes to share a little bit more about what these solutions look like at Wovio. Just want to confirm everyone can see my screen. Perfect. Amazing. Okay, so what are we doing about it here at Wovio, right? We talked a lot about this is the problem, that is the problem. What are we doing about it? So for a start, we built a community wallet, which helps mobilize community capital so that folks can access low-cost credit and build their credit scores and credit history in a way that's secure and transparent. And what this looks like, I'll start with maybe a feel of the room. How many people are African? If you're African or Caribbean, I'm just going to say out some names of what we call this concept, the concept of community wallets or rotating saving circles, right? You might have heard of it called Ajo or Susu in West Africa. If you've heard of that, give me a thumbs up. Ajo Susu. I see Presh has heard of that, and Meets has heard of that as well. In West Africa and Francophone Africa, really, you might have heard of it as a tontine. You might have heard of it in the Caribbeans as what's the word, pardna. They also call it susu or throw a box or something like that. In East Africa, they would call it chama in Kenya, or ipimina in Rwanda. I'm Zambian, they would call it chilimba, right? You go out of Africa, you go to Latin America, they call it tanda. You go to Asia, right? You go to the Philippines, you hear them call it paluagan. So different names for this concept, and the concept remains the same in different parts of the world, which is essentially people pulling funds together and saying this is a community pool of funds that instead of going to the payday lenders and borrowing from them and then paying them back with interest, we can borrow from this pool of funds in a way that's secure and transparent. So this system and model has existed for decades in these communities, especially communities that are very much more leaning towards socialism, leaning also towards collectivism, right, and more communal. So what we've done at Wovio is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just building on these traditional models that have worked for generations and really preserving indigenous practices is what we're doing here by adding the technology and forward-thinking nature of where the world is going towards. So we've built an app where people can continue to do their tandas, their idiminas, their susu, partner, whatever else you want to call it. You're able to do that on our app, and we've removed the trust, the trust fear factor, if you will, because in the traditional sense, there's always this reservation that what if, whoever the banker lady is or the banker guy is, the treasurer in this case, runs away with the money because they're the ones in charge of keeping the community funds together that people borrow from. But now this liability is moving to Wovio because we take care of all the funds in a way that's secure and transparent. And we've also then integrated it into the Canadian financial landscape when it comes to credit building, in that we have a partnership with Equifax that allows you to build your credit score every time you contribute to this community pool, but also every time you borrow from this community pool and pay back on time as promised. So that's the community wallet that we've built. It's an app. Our company Wovio has been around now for almost 4 years. We have almost 5,000 users in Canada that are using this community wallet to mobilize capital and access low-cost credit and build their credit histories. And we've also raised north of $3 million from venture capital community organizations to bring this initiative to life. And so I've talked a little bit about Wovio as a whole. I'm just going to break it down quite quickly on what services do we offer, how is this beneficial for you, and what are the outcomes from this. So I've mentioned financial education being at the core of everything that we do, and you'll see this unravel as we do these workshops this month and beyond. I've talked about the credit score monitoring and credit building piece. I've talked about I haven't talked about I've talked about the default protection, which is the trust space, right, where you can rest easy participating in this traditional model of finance, knowing that there's a default protection from Warvio, that if anyone defaults with their contribution into the pool, Warvio takes care of all of that. We also have cash advances. I'm especially excited for the holidays that are coming up, because we have community grants that we're giving out for anyone that needs some funds for like for family emergencies, buy gifts, travel back home. So we have interest-free grants that we'll be giving out. So keep a lookout for that. And then the savings and the credit group that I've mentioned, which is a community pool. And the benefits of this is less financial stress and improved health, right? If you have a better way to borrow, right, a reduced cost of borrowing, then you're less stressed about paying back, the 49% interest rate on anything. And then also improved financial education and credit building. And with some of the challenges that we have, some of the initiatives that we have, like our November Savings Challenge, the outcome there is enforcing saving practices and financial security for our members. So this capital deployment program, I'll walk through really quickly. Guys, I realize I'm kind of running out of time. I under budgeted, which I should learn and pay attention as they teach about budgeting today, because you budget money, but you got to budget time as well. So I'll rush through it. One of the initiatives that I would like for you to look out for from us in the coming weeks and months is our capital deployment program, which is essentially giving you access to interest-free capital upfront. We're still working out the details of this, but we're hoping it could go as high as $5,000 to even $10,000 interest-free capital, especially for those that are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are immigrants trying to establish themselves here in Canada, so that these loans can help responsible borrowing on your part, but also help you build your business and establish your business here. So keep a lookout for that. And another exciting one is upscaling grants. So if you're an immigrant, you're still navigating career, and we know a huge part of career navigation in Canada is, as immigrants, we find ourselves having to upscale and rescale as many times as it takes to get the job that you need in Canada, and to also really adapt to the ever-changing job market. So we have an exciting giveaway happening over the next couple of months. This just went live a few minutes ago, perhaps. So scan this QR code. I also put the codes in the chat, the links and everything in the chat. But scan this QR code. You might be lucky enough to win $500 towards upscaling for a course of your choice, or the instructions will be listed once you click the link. I'll skip through this. I'll put this in the chat as well, but if you're able to scan it quickly. And okay, and then on to the exciting thing, because I've talked a lot. Today, I'm very excited to kick off this session, to kick off this series, the Community Financial Education series. And I think it's very important that we start with a community that is a huge contributor to Canada's economy, and that is the immigrant and newcomer community. So as much as you're contributing to Canada's economy, how do we make sure that you are empowered financially to make sound decisions? So today, I am very excited to have my lovely friend Adiba, who is the powerhouse behind Phoenix Consulting, where financial dreams take flight. She's a proud immigrant herself with over 7 years in finance and 4 years running her own firm. And she brings a multicultural perspective to the table because she's an immigrant herself, so she understands our positionality when it comes to finance. And she's not your typical number cruncher, right? She's a financial strategist. She sits down with people beyond spreadsheets, understands their day-to-day, and really education is what she does, because she believes that what you don't know, what you don't know, you don't know. And the goals are determined by what you know. So if she can add to what you know, then she can stretch your vision. And her mission is really focused on turning your big dreams into real wins. And she's really been a game changer for newcomers, to be honest. And she wears different cultural lenses to help people from all over the world navigate Canada's financial system and build wealth, buy their first and second homes and anchor their retirement, build wealth beyond borders, build wealth here in Canada, but also remit some, financial support back home. And on her social media, she's amassed over 160,000 people who love her bite-sized and witty financial wisdom. You probably have seen her on CBC's The National, because, she's a boss lady like that. And you probably read about her in Toronto Star. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Adiba, to kick it off for us.
Thank you, Justina. Wow, I have to do zero introduction today. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for taking out a portion of your evening with us. I know finance can feel boring, so I'm going to try my best to make it fun, because as much as I love numbers, I also like enjoyment and things as such. So your comment box will be my saving grace, because I will be interacting with you guys as we speak today. So let's get into, let me just share this screen.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh. Gorgeous. Okay. So before we start, what's your guys' favorite Canadian food? Put in the comments. I'm going to show you guys mine. It's something I think Justina does not like. I don't know if I can see comments. So Justina said not poutine. Do you guys have anything that you guys like that's Canadian? Oh, you guys seeing double? I can't see comments. Well, I'll check it out later. So I'm going to tell you guys what I like. I love poutine. I'm sorry, Justina. That's my favorite Canadian food. Anything else I really don't like. I'm not a big seafood person, but we won't get into that today. So today we're really talking about the financial accounts. Now, one of the biggest things as a newcomer is you have to understand how the system works here. It is not that you need the literacy. You just need to know the system, how it works, because you have the literacy of how systems work back home. So you just have to use that mindset of let me learn something new, like beginner's mindset to learn something new here. And you'll find that it's a lot of things that are very black and white, and you can create strategies with it. Another thing is that whatever you see, you can use it beyond what it seems. There's nothing called loopholes. There's just strategies, and your conquest in Canada is going to be how to learn these strategies. Because once you know these strategies, you can do a lot with it. Just like, if someone plays a football game, we're not talking about American football, like the regular world football game, if I can give 10 players the rules of the game, it's going to be maybe 2 or 3 who's going to find tricks, who's going to dribble the ball, who's going to get to the net differently and score, right? So 10 people can play the same game, which is this financial system in Canada. But why is it that some people win more than others? Because some people know the strategies more. They know the rules of the game very much better. Because if I put a new player in the team, guess what? They might not know the game or how to work with everybody. So that's what we're here to do, is know literally the foundation of the game, the financial game of Canada. So the first account that you guys are definitely going to be opening is your checkings account. A lot of people get confused between checkings account and this account, which I'm going to go into in a second. It's your high interest savings account. They also confuse this account with this account, tax-free savings account. So let's go back to the checking account. So your checking account is as simple. Every other country also has this. Every country, anywhere that's a bank account, that's your checking account. Usually your checking account is used for your salaries and things as such. It's focused to create liquidity and accessibility. You guys can feel free to screenshot as much as you like. I made the slides in that way so you guys can take home the knowledge. It might be overwhelming for some of you, and that's totally okay. And this is for your daily transaction. The thing you have to keep in mind in checking account that sometimes as newcomers people don't realize is the bank fees and something called overdraft. So bank fees are monthly. There are accounts where if you put in $4,000, they won't charge you any bank fees. that's fine. But a lot of people don't know that you can have bank fees. And then sometimes type of checking account you have, they might have fees on each transaction, or they might not have at all, especially if you're like a student. For the student time being, they'll have nothing at all. Like the student accounts are very minor amounts, like a $4 monthly fee. That's where, you know, you have the 5 banks, the TD, Scotia, you have BMO, you have, what did I miss? RBC, CIBC. These are top 5 banks in Canada. Usually if you're not doing an in-person bank, you're doing like kiosk banks. So you're doing like Coho, you're doing Tangerine, you're doing EQ Bank. Those are places where you can have a checking account, but no fees. So it's a great way to also collude that with your check-ins account. So just keep in mind, your checking account is just a place to put your money, take it out. That's it. But you're going to use your checking accounts to put money into these other accounts. So let's get into it. High interest savings account. One thing, okay, I brought for you guys my Tupperware from my kitchen because this is very important to understand. Okay, so one thing people get wrong is they don't visualize how the accounts work in Canada, and this is why I brought this in. All right, so you have this box, okay? So every account I'm talking about is a box. And I'm going to tell you why this is important to know everything is a box in just a second. So high interest savings account is just a box. It's a box where you pretty much put money for short-term or mid-term savings account. Funny enough, it's a type of box that doesn't have a limit. That means, so I'm going to open this up. So it doesn't have a limit, meaning you can put as much money in here. It's not a problem. When money goes in here, there's no taxes. So one thing about the Canadian system, in certain transactions of your money, you're not going to have fees. That's one thing already that could happen. But you're going to have to think about taxes, which is a fee to the government. So you're thinking about fees to the bank. You have to think about fees to the government. Okay. So this is where you're going to put money. And if you just, most high interest savings account, also known as HISA, when you just put money in here, it just sits in there. If I put it to the brim, it just sits in there. I can put more than that, not a problem. When I put money inside this, the government doesn't knock my door for any taxes. But if you get like a high interest savings account that's like 4% and you're really seeing a difference, like maybe you put $100,000 and you brought it from back home, you're just letting it sit there, you might see some taxation. So you have to keep in mind, this is just a place where it's easy to access the fund because you can take out the money without any taxation. You can put in the money without any taxation. But when it's growing in here, it's not investments though. But there's growth, like banks will give you maybe 1%, 2%. Some days it's 3-4% because of the economy now. Those 3-4% can be taxable when it comes to you. But a lot of times people don't feel it because it's really small taxes. So that's how the high interest savings account work, okay? And you guys can ask questions at any point. We'll jump right into it. The next one is tax-free savings account. Now, we'll have to put the lid back on. Because tax-free savings account, I think the annual contribution limit has increased. I have to update that. The tax-free savings account, again, is a box. Why is this a box? Because a lot of people think that once you put money in a tax-free savings account, it's going to grow for you. No. When you put money in this box, which is the tax-free savings account, it doesn't grow for you unless what you do is you open up inside the tax-free savings account. You have to open up, let's do this again. You have to open up an investment account inside it. Okay, so you have the tax-free savings account, which is a regular box. You can leave cash in there. But if you want that cash to grow, you have to, inside the box, open up another, like an investment portion of it, right? So what we can say is part of the cash, you can put it into the investment account. Okay, now that is the portion that's going to grow. The portion that's sitting there, that's not going to grow, but the portion that's inside the allocated box, which is for investment, it will grow. This is where, you know, you can pick your stocks and bonds and GICs. It goes in that little allocated box. Maybe your entire money from the TFSA goes into this allocated box and your entire box is invested. But usually if you just put money in your TFSA, it's not doing anything. It's literally acting like a high interest savings account with a fancy name. So if you really want to use it for what it is, you have to allocate it into investment, because in the high interest savings account, you can't put any investments through it. Like you can't invest into like an Apple stock or a Google stock. But through a TFSA, you can invest in Apple stock, Google stock, government, treasury bills, you know, those things that are common back home, like treasury bills. Okay. Now, with this, comes a lid. So with the high interest savings account, you guys saw there's no lid, but with this, there's a lid. What does that mean? This box grows big every year. Since the age of 18 or since the day you landed in Canada, this box starts growing for you. So this year, my box might be this big, okay? And then next year, my box will be bigger because every year, 6,000, I think now it's 7,000, 7,000 gets added. So every year, my room limit gets bigger. Sometimes you'll do your taxes, you'll see a room limit. That's not money that's in there. That's the space you have. That's a contribution limit, okay? So keep that in mind. Putting money inside the TFSA, when I push money in, whether it's allocated or just sitting in cash, it's tax-free, meaning no taxes, no fees. Beautiful. When you take it out, there's also no taxes, which is great. That's the whole beauty of it. Another thing why it's so different from the high interest savings account is whatever is growing. So even though I allocated the smaller portion inside, that's for investments, but let's say I have 10 grand inside the investment portion. I have like maybe 20 grand sitting in cash inside the account, and then I have 10 grand that's in that smaller box that's actually getting invested. But let's say that 10 grand grew to like 15 grand. It can grow as much, but you will not get taxed, okay? Even if your growth in this account is beyond the limit, so beyond this lid, you cannot be taxed. The only time you can get taxed inside a tax-free savings account is if you put beyond the lid, okay? So beyond your limit, so keep that in mind. Next one, okay, first home savings account. That's another box that looks a lot. So these are all boxes that look the same, but they're all different sizes and for different purpose. Just like you have different Tupperware for different things. You might have one for your soups and sauces. You might have one for your chicken and vegetables. So you have different boxes for different reasons. So your accounts are for different reasons, but they're all under the concept of it's a box with space in it for you to store your money. Okay. Now, your first home savings account.
Yeah. Sorry, quick question. If I can jump in before we jump from the TFSA, you mentioned something that I think I wanted to get a clarification on. Around the only time we can be taxed is when we contribute beyond our lead. Does it mean you're being taxed for anything that is beyond your limit, or you're being taxed for everything completely? So if my limit is, say,
great question.
Yeah, I think that would be great to clarify.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's say you put in, so going back to TFSA, that's what she's asking about. If you put money in here and maybe, I don't know, an inch of it or like $100 is beyond the lid, you only get taxed on the portion that's beyond the lid, so above the limit. So if the limit is, let's say you have 30 grand limit that you saw that you have, and you put in 35 grand of your own money, not growth, but own money, the 5 grand portion would get taxed. So that's a good question as well.
Sounds good.
There's actually, if you guys for fun want to see a story, there's a guy who turned, I think it's $200 or $500 into like $1 million in a TFSA or $1 billion. But there's a story for that. I can send you guys the link. You guys can reach out to me. It's really cool because TFSAs have no limit in growth. Like it can grow the heck, like, and you can not get taxed. So that's the beautiful part about TFSAs. Now, first home savings account. So first home savings account is a new account. It actually just came last year to push and hope people can actually save up for their first home in Canada. It came in April 2023. So it's just over a year now. This one is as it sounds. It's for your first home savings account. Again, it is a box also. The box limit every year, it's set in stone. It's 8,000 from the day you start. So if you started this year, you already have an 8,000 limit. If you had started last year, it'll be 8,000 plus 8,000 of this year. So that's 16 grand with a lifetime of 40 grand. So 8 times 5 years, pretty much. If, let's say, another thing with these boxes, you guys have to keep in mind, also with the TFSA, is let's say, you know, I have an entire box limit, but even with this, last year, I only used half of it. Maybe I didn't have enough money allocated or I needed to do other things, help family. I can only fill up maybe half of the box last year. Guess what? That excess space that's left over in that box gets pushed into this year. So same thing with FHSA. Whatever you don't fill up in your room limit for the year, it gets moved over to next year, which is great. That means you never lose space. You always have a growing space in these accounts. Okay, so this one, very important to note, you can only take it out for your first home. If you don't end up using it for your first home, then you can move it into an RRSP, which we'll talk about in just a second, but it's for your first home. It's not as easy as, oh, I'm just going to transfer it in my account on an app. You actually have to go to the bank and give them like a closing date. You have 30 days from closing of a house to be able to pull money out without being taxed on this or having any repercussions for taking money out. So contributions. So let's get into contributions. So first, withdrawal, only for first home. That's the qualifying withdrawal. It's tax-free withdrawal. You have a limit of 8,000, 40 grand for a lifetime, which grows over 5 years. And room limit moves over whatever's not used. Tax deductible. So with Canada, so we get taxed on everything, right? We get taxed on things we buy, our income, everything, even a lot of the investment accounts. So we have to be mindful. And this is something that actually helps reduce your potential taxation. Meaning, let's say you had an income of 80 grand, okay? You put in the full 8,000 for this year because you just started the account. On your CRA documents, when you do your taxes, your income on paper will not show as 80 grand. It'll actually show as 72 grand. So they're going to deduct 8,000 from it, which is helpful because when you have a salary or any kind of income other than self-employed, they already take your taxes, right? But now when you go do your taxes, you're telling to the government like, hey, I didn't make as much on paper. You're using the rules of the system. And instead of 80 grand, you're showing the government, hey, I only actually made 72 grand, even though you guys have already taxed me for 80 grand. Guess what? That difference between the taxation of the 80 grand versus the 72 grand of your salary, they're going to give it back to you. So let's say you're going to get a return, like a regular return on an 80 grand income, you're going to get way more because you're tax reduced on paper. A lot of things in Canada are based on how can we use the rules of the system to change numbers on paper. Because again, these are rules that the government of Canada has laid out. It's just about people figuring it out. They're not going to always tell you exactly how to do it. They have the information. That's why I always say, if you don't know, you don't know what you look for also, right? If you don't even know what these accounts are, how will you even look into them? These are all on the government website as well. But knowing how to strategize comes after learning about these things. Okay, so that's first-time home savings account. All right, next one. Again, it's another box. So far, the TFSA has a lid, the FHSA has a lid, so does your RRSP, your Registered Retirement Savings Account. There's a reason why we have a home on the side as well, because there's two reasons qualifying. There's actually three qualifying reasons you can take money out of your RRSP. Going back a little bit, tax-free savings account, you can pull that money out, not a problem. FHSA qualified withdrawal only. Here as well, it has to be a qualified withdrawal. If you don't do a qualified withdrawal, you have a huge chunk of tax that you have to pay just because you took the money out. Okay, so contributions. So we say FHSAs and RSPs are like cousins. They work very similarly. So just like how you could reduce your income on paper by putting money into an FHSA, same thing with an RSP. You can reduce your income on paper by putting money into an RSP. If you're below, usually I would say around below like 50K income, RSPs are not as useful for you. But if you're like above 50K, you can actually make use of it because you would rather leave that room for later. So what do I mean? So the room determined on the RSP, like how the government tells you, oh, this is how much space you have, is based on your income for RSP. For TFSAs and FHSA, it's a set stone. It doesn't matter your age, anything like that. It just matters how many years or when you started the account and the limitations of the account. But RSP can differ from me versus you versus a third person versus a fourth person, like our limit based on the income since 18. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why sometimes, a lot of times when people are just building young professionals, they're not going to put money in the RSP unless your work matches it, because you're not going to get as much for it and might as well use it for your higher income years. Now, contributions are tax deductible. We love that. If you hear tax deductibility, we love that. Deduction means reduction. Reduction means more money in your pocket. Or if you're a self-employed person, less money to give to the government. So we do like that. Now, Withdrawals from RSP, we have to keep in mind, are taxed as income upon retirement. So that's one thing you have to plan around that, because it is for a retirement account. Why do we have a retirement account? It's because you want to accumulate, and get to a point where your accumulated savings pays for your living without you having to go to work. Okay, so that is taxed usually at a lower rate because you're retired. Now, there's two other reasons you can actually pull out money out of your RSP before retirement. First time home buyers, just like your FHSA. And two, you can pull out for lifelong learning. Means if you want to go back to school, maybe you want to change careers, you can pull out up to 10 grand. Mind you, you have to have money in this box to pull it out. I'm just saying that what you have in there can be pulled out tax-free, because usually it's not tax-free. You can pull out tax-free for your first home and also tax-free for lifelong learning. First home, same rule applies as the FHSA. You have to show documents. Okay. The only other thing with the RSP is, compared to the FHSA, if you do use the RSP for your first home, just keep in mind you do have to put money back to yourself. It's not to the government, not to the bank. It's money to yourself. It's like taking loans against your own account. Let's say you took 20 grand out, you have to put back that 20 grand over a 15-year period. So just keep that in mind. In FHSA, you don't. Once you pull that money out, boom, get the house, no problemo, you're good to go. Okay, but with this one, you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so this is one of the last accounts we're going to talk about. This might not apply to you if you don't have kids or siblings, or even grandkids. So this will apply, or nieces or nephews. This applies if you have any of those things I just said. So this is your registered education savings plan. This is a really nice thing that Canada has in order to actually get for post-secondary. Actually, when we first came to Canada, my mom actually has set it up as small as $50 for me and my sister per month, $50 and $50. And it was able to cover 1 year of my tuition when I went to McMaster University. So this is a really good account because whatever you put in, the government matches 20%. Means you literally get a return on your money right away just because you put the money in, opened it up. There's grants through these accounts. There's a right away $2,000 grant for any child. If you know someone who's about to turn 19, but they're still 18, they can just open the account and get $2,000. You just got to do it like ASAP. So you're able to get this. Growth in the account, tax sheltered. All these accounts are tax sheltered except for the high interest savings account. Everything is tax sheltered, means growth in it. No government's going to come after the growth, or they don't want the piece of any of those pies. It's only some of them at withdrawal. Matching contributions. And you just have to keep in mind, this is not a big deal, to be honest. Withdrawals for education expense are taxed in the child's name. So let's say, so when I first went to school, I actually wasn't really working. Like a lot of people, when they're students, they don't work, especially their first year, second year, or they work very part-time. So you barely feel the taxes if there are even any. If they have no income at all, a lot of students don't have any income, they're focused on the school part only, then there's zero taxation, which is great. So again, it's at the child's name, not the parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles who saved this or the siblings. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So it's a great account for post-secondary. They also allow outside of Canada as well with this. Like if someone wants to go to school outside of Canada, as long as they, you talk to them, they a lot of times approve it. It's not a big deal. So that's a good one as well. Okay. This is a little cheat sheet that I made for you guys. You guys can always take a screenshot just to rewrap everything. Checking account is like its own solo dolo thing. It does its own thing. But everything else, think of it like a box, some with a lid, some without, some with compartments that needs for it to grow. So high interest savings account, they don't do much, easy to draw, a little bit of growth. TFSAs, not tax deductible, tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawal, easy to withdraw if not invested, which means is if in that box that I had money in, if it's invested, I have to sell my investments, then I can cash out. It's not that big of a deal, but it's not as easy as just press in one day sometimes. RRSP, same thing with RRSP, TFSA, and FHSA. You have to compartmentalize your investments. You can put everything in the investments in the box, or a portion of it. just putting in an RSP, just putting in an FHSA, just putting money in TFSA is just like putting money in a box that is not doing anything. Keep that in mind, because some people are like, oh, I've been putting money in my accounts for like 2 years. There's no growth because it was not invested. These are just vehicles to store your money. You need to put the engine, which is the allocation of investing. FHSA, only for first home, needs to be qualified. Withdrawal, same with the RSP. RESP, tax-free growth. Tax depends on withdrawal tax depends on the child income. Also needs to be qualified. You can't just say, hey, my kid is going to school or so on. It needs to be proved. And then these are other non-government accounts that exist that you can also store money, which I won't go into. These are just things you guys can research on your own as well. Okay. And one thing to keep in mind, all these tax laws and rules change all the time. Like the TFSA limits every year change all the time. The RSP max limits change all the time. Again, this might be a lot over time. Just every month, maybe take one account that you really want to learn about and dive into it and think of different strategies with it if possible, and so on to create specific solutions. Okay, so that brings me on to the end of our conversation. Do you guys have any questions? I'd love to.
Thank you, Adiba. Wow, that was very, very insightful, honestly. Like even for me, I didn't know you could do the RESP thing. Why didn't anyone do that for me when I was a kid? Yeah, well, I'm glad I had a scholarship for university, but it would have gone a long way, especially with the
100%.
option to like use it to study abroad, because those can be quite that can be quite pricey. But
Exactly.
thank you for going through that. If anyone has questions, please unmute yourself or add it in the chat. In the meantime, I'll go through some of the questions that we already have in the chat, Adiba.
Okay.
So one of them, I think you touched on it in the end, was can one invest in the RESP?
What is the question? Can anyone invest in the RESP?
Yes.
No. So it has to be for someone who's under 18. So the beneficiary of the account has to be for a kid, a minor. And it could be only family that can open it up for them. So usually grandparents, aunts, uncles, and parents that can open it. An adult has to open it up for them.
Yeah, I feel that they meant more so investment growth. Like once you put the money into the RESP, can you then invest in stocks or bonds?
Oh, individually. Yes. So that's another thing with these accounts. So how I said there's a little box to allocate. You can either give that little box of investment allocation to the bank or a company to invest for you. Like here's my little box inside my box. Or you can actually invest yourself. Like it's called self-directed. You take care of the growth of the account. It doesn't take away the fact of you getting the grants. Just make sure you do have access to the grant and stuff like that.
Amazing. And even for these accounts, Presh confirms that that's what she was asking with regards to the RESP. Even for these accounts, though, like where are people opening them up? Are you doing it with your bank? Are you doing like I know for my tax-free savings account, for example, I do that with Wealth Simple, right? So are you doing it with your bank? What are the different places that people can go and open these accounts?
Great question. So I prefer also Wealth Simple for people who are doing especially like passive self-directed investing. Why I say passive is because Wealth Simple is not a platform you can use for trading. Like you can't be a day trader on it. The delays are too much, like 15 minutes. But for anybody who just want to leave it and forget it, that's like me. I don't like to think too much, and just let it grow. You know, we say time in the market is better than timing the market. Most of us are not experts on that, even as a financial professional. A lot of us are not even Warren Buffett's. So therefore, Wealth Simple is great for that. If you really want to get into day trading, if any of you guys want to, then you can open up like a self-directed TD account, RBC, but I actually recommend Questrade. A lot of these banks, they have a lot more fees, which I think we know by now. So a lot of these online banks, because they don't have locations, they're able to allocate more towards the customer and not have to pay, not get them to rent out their accounts. So I would recommend Questrade if you want to time the market.
Amazing, amazing. And I like that quote. Yvonne affirms it as well in the chat. Time in the market is better than timing the market. That's a very beautiful one. We're definitely going to quote you on that one. And then with regards to, and Fox, if you have any questions, add them to the chat. I'm just going to go through the ones that have already been added. So moving on to the RSP, you mentioned borrowing it from yourself. Actually, before we go there, back to the RESP, you mentioned in your facts, in your cheat sheet, that you can withdraw it, but there might be some taxes with the RESP depending on the income. Can you clarify on that a little bit?
Yeah, so RESP, again, back to this education savings account, is taxable at the hand of the student, let's just say. But most students, they don't have much income, so you barely will see it. Sometimes you have no income when going into university, college. So that time when you're filing, you're not going to even have sometimes even 10 grand of income in the year. So it will be like minimal to nothing, because there's a threshold. There's a amount of income in Canada that you don't get taxed up to. I believe it always changes, around 12 grand. Up to that, you don't get taxed at all in Canada. It's almost like tax-free income. So if you're making up to that, usually there's no taxes, but it's like, so there are some students who actually make pretty good income while they're going to school. Maybe, they're taking a little bit course load less, they're still working full-time. Or that's another thing with RESPs, you have to be in school full-time. They don't allow part-time. And so on. And other scholarships don't affect your RESP. Like you could have hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars coming from somewhere else. RESP is individual by itself. So yeah, that's the thing. The income is only if the student themselves is making a good amount of money, then they will get taxed on it based on the full income of everything.
I see. So the withdrawal from RESP will kind of act as an additional income to the income they're already making from the job. Going to be taxed together. And so if they make, say, 80K for whatever reason, and they're withdrawing 10K from RESP, they're going to be taxed on 90K.
Correct, because it's deemed as income. You're right. Exactly. Oh, now we have to also, like, the specifics of it too is they don't get taxed when they're at 10K either. So there's a portion. So by law in Canada, there's a portion of, it's a rule that whatever you contribute into an account, other than our RSP, whatever you contribute into the account, let's say you put in 7 grand, that grew to 10 grand, right? In that RESP, that 7 grand, if you pull it out, there's no taxation, not a problem. But that 3 grand, if you want to pull out the full 10 grand, that 3 grand is not yours, it's the profit. They'll tax you, the income will be 3 grand. So it's not actually too bad. So yeah, so when you do the calculation, the taxable income portion is a lot less because your taxable income is the profit portion of your investments.
It's gains. That's what they mean when they say, because people use all these words and I never understand. It's like, what is capital gains? Who's gaining what capital? So it's the gains, the profits.
Exactly. It's the gains on what you contributed. They want a piece of that. And it's not even the entire gains. There's like a calculation. It's only half of your gains they use as taxable income.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, this is why education is so important, guys. Like I've been in Canada 8 years, and all of these words I never really understood. But yeah, thanks for clarifying it. Okay, so now we move on to the RRSP, the Retirement Registered Savings Account, whatever it's called. So 2 questions there, because initially you mentioned being able to borrow from that. To kind of lend yourself, whether it's for a down payment and having to repay it, or I think for education as well and having to repay it. So 2 questions for myself and Yvonne. One, when you're repaying it within the period of 15 years you mentioned, are you repaying it interest-free? And what are some consequences of not repaying it?
Great question. So within the 15 years, it's interest-free. It's like an interest-free loan for 15 years. To yourself, which is great. And when you pay back, you're paying back into your own retirement, which is also great. So use it for school or home. You can even use it for both. And then you pay yourself back within the 15 year. Beautiful. Now, what happens if you don't pay it back for 15 years? Post the first day, post 15 years, you've not put any dollar back, it's going to start accruing interest. It's going to become a loan. It will start affecting your credit. So that's what happens. Like they might even close the account on you just like a credit card. So it just horribly affects your credit and the interest growth. Sometimes the interest that you have to owe is on a month-to-month basis. It just keeps growing and it's not nice.
Okay. No, that's good to know. And then question on the TFSA. I feel like I'm the only one asking questions here. So, folks, if you have questions, please put them in.
Yvonne has a question, I think. She said,
Yeah.
what are some consequences when repaying the RSP? Is it just tax on the amount? What are the consequences when repaying? Okay, so there's no consequences when you pay back within 15 years. Like I said, is it just getting taxed on the amount? And if it's for your if it's for your first home or your lifelong learning or both, there's no taxation in that equation at all, up to the max. Like right now, you can pull out of your RSP up to 60 grand. Of course, you have to have the money in there. So let's say you have 70 grand, you took out 60 grand, no taxation because it's for your first home. And the funny thing is, you don't have to use the entire 60 grand for your first home. If we have leftover money, they don't care. They can use it for furniture. You could just let it sit. It really doesn't matter. So that's something to keep in mind. And the amount, you only get taxed though, regardless, upon retirement. How do you get taxed? So if you're going to be a well-off person in retirement, you have to be very mindful because RSP will be taxed like a well-off person. If you're going to be medium to like a chill income, because sometimes you might not need as much income in retirement, at least Canadian income, you don't have as much, you won't get taxed as much. You'll be in the lower tax bracket. Yvonne raised a hand.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I had like a follow-up question. Thank you so much, Adiba and Justina.
Of course.
So my follow-up question is, say for instance, someone took out some money from their RSP for some education, and that's the loan to themselves. And over the 15 years, they didn't pay it. But what happened was they were charged money to pay back the government. So is that where the charge comes, or is it something that they have to pay back to each? Because you know how people can open many RSP accounts all over. Would they be paying back the government, or is it that like there's a one-time charge based off of their tax bracket at the time, of the amount that they, when you take out, when you put in from the RSP, your income reduces, right? So would it just be the year that, let's say the first year of the 15th year that they're supposed to pay back, or, the delay at maybe the 16th year, for instance, now, they would charge them, I guess, a year interest, or would it be that year, the amount just automatically adds to their income tax bracket at the year and they pay the taxes on the extra amount? I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, so I want to also clarify, you also said, yeah, so you don't get taxed when you put money in there, you get taxed when taking it out for retirement, but we're talking about for school, correct? So for school, we don't get taxed when pulling it out. You have your timeline to put it back. When you're putting it back within the 15 years, you're also not paying the government back. Here's the thing, when we're taking money out of the box I said, when you're putting money back, you're just putting it back into your own box. So it's like you're just giving yourself back money, which is great, but you don't get the tax deduction. So once you pull money out of RSP and it's like for school or house, it's a loan. So then if you put money back in, it's just a payback. You don't get the tax deductions anymore. Now, let's talk about, okay, we didn't even pay off the 15th year. Maybe you have some owing balances by 15th year because maybe you only paid off a portion of it. So at that time, there is a standard of interest rate that they already have every year. It will just depend on that year, whatever Canada has. And then for the leftover amount, it will depend. Sometimes, depending on your income, they can add it, and sometimes they won't. So you would have to ask your bank for that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if we have any more questions. We're past the 7 p.m. mark, so I'm just going to start winding down. If folks have questions. Well, I have one last one, Adiba. So just to confirm, TFSA is not tax deductible. So I can't have like my paycheck, a certain percentage going directly automatically into my TFSA and then claim that as like reduced tax for some reason. Does that make sense? My question. So
so you're saying if you're putting money in the TFSA, you can't use it for reducing your income?
Can I use that? So if, for example, my income is like 50K and I get 10K from there to my TFSA that year, so am I gonna be taxed on the 50K income, or am I gonna be taxed on 40K income?
50K, unfortunately, because so they're like, hey, we're gonna help tax your savings account. You can take it out with ease, so they don't give you the benefit of putting money in it. Whereas RSP, it's not easy to take out, but they give you a benefit, like create an incentive to put money in it. Right. So that's how it is. If there's ease in one spot, they're going to tighten up the other spot.
Other spots, yeah. So
Yeah.
they give with one hand and kind of take with the other,
Yes.
essentially. Amazing. Well, this has been very, very informative, Adiba, and I'm gonna hold space if anyone has any last minute questions, and if not, I'm gonna thank Adiba for being here with us today. So this recording will be shared on our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following our social media channels, and and whatever else, we'll make sure you have access to this information, because it has been very insightful, but it's also been a lot, right? So I want to make sure you have a place that you can go and replay while you're showering, while you're cooking, while you're on your drive, and that will be available. And we have 3 more sessions to go as part of our educational series. So there's one next week, Wednesday, which is about understanding credit scores and their importance. So Adiba mentioned how, for example, if you're not paying back to your RRSP within the 15 years period, it becomes a loan with interest, and it starts affecting your credit score. So you then have to understand what is a credit score and why is it important that this is affecting my credit score. And then also just understanding debt and reasonable borrowing, and then savings habits. So all these links are added to the chat, but they'll also be sent in a follow-up email package in addition to the recording, as well as the slides, and also Adiba's contact information. So if you need to reach out to Adiba, you can follow her on IG, CEO Adiba. And Adiba, if it's okay, can I also share your email with folks on this in the follow-up email? Yeah, I'll share Adiba's email as well. So yeah, guys, thank you. This has been great. You have been a very engaged audience, so thank you very much. Again, don't forget, we have some exciting giveaways happening. So if you attended this workshop, you've entered to win $100. And so as part of the follow-up email, we'll also share who the winner is. And we also have grants that we're giving for upskilling. So she talked about, Adiba, the education, the RESP, and we know education is very important for improved employability, increased earning potential. So we have $500 grants that we're giving out over the next couple of weeks to 1 to 2 lucky winners, actually. So the link in the chat and also in the follow-up email will have instructions around that. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to wish everyone a good evening. I also stay back for like 5-10 minutes if anyone wants to ask questions about Wovio and the work that we do, and just chat in general. But thanks for coming. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Justina and Adiba. This is
No
great.
problem. Thank you, Annalisa. I will stop recording as well.